Hey class, this is Joe. I did chapter 39 in our book, which is named A Theory of Persistent Offending and Desistance from Crime, written by Laub and Sampson. The central question of this chapter is, what are the mechanisms underlying the processes of persistent offending and desistance from crime? In other words, what makes offenders continue to break the law, and what makes them break away from it? Factors that affect these questions are measure of informal social control and measures of formal social control, responsibilities, which include work, family, and money, attitudes towards authority, age, time and place the offender's in, which in essence kind of just means culture, human agency, and routine. So one of the concepts discussed in this chapter is called desistance by default. Desistance by default is characterized by the offender coming across a fork in the road where they take the high road, knowingly or unknowingly. The book calls these forks structural turning points or side bets. For example, let's say Nick is a persistent drinker at the bar, regularly blows off classes and doesn't really exercise. And then he meets Zoe, who occasionally drinks, but she's more focused on class and exercise. As Nick and Zoe form a relationship, Nick will go to the bar less, attend classes more regularly, and exercise more to be with her. Over time, this creates a routine for Nick that becomes his new norm. Nick forming a relationship with Zoe that he doesn't want to lose is an example of a structural turning point, and his new norm becomes his desistance by default because he's already changed his lifestyle to cease his deviant activities. This is an instance where informal social controls had a huge effect on Nick. The same effect can be reached by getting a new stable job, for example. The chapter also stresses that deconnectivity and marginality create persistent offenders. What differentiates repeat offenders from regular offenders is the fact that their lives aren't stable, nor do they have stable social bonds with other people. Factors such as not having a permanent address, steady job, spouse, or children contribute enormously to offending again. The book stresses that human agency is an enormous contributing factor to change. Going back to my fork in the road analogy, at every turn, there's a choice to make. New job offers or pressures to return to your previous state of living are always present. It's up to you to consistently make the right choices to steer away from deviant behavior. Sampson and Laub also repeat that these choices aren't predictable, but that they do exist. This part of the theory doesn't really convince me, though, and it also makes it difficult to falsify. Saying that you have to do the work is kind of common sense, and seeing as how it's like your life, it also makes falling back in your own pattern of living your fault, no matter what. I don't find the inclusion of this concept to really add to the theory at all, and under Occam's razor, I'd just say scrap it entirely because it's not really necessary for the rest of the theory. When talking about the implications of this theory, Sampson and Laub identify random noise as a factor that influences people, in addition to the constant interaction between the individual and their environment. They state that some offenders start early and stop, whereas others start early and continue to offend over long periods of time. Sampson and Laub freely admit that long-term patterns of offending cannot be explained by individual differences, childhood characteristics, or adolescent characteristics. And to quote them, the sum of the parts includes individual differences, environmental differences, social interactions, and random chance events. All of these lead to considerable, noisy, unpredictable development. So really, I feel like this theory is kind of a crappy version of social learning theory and social bond theory put together with a lot of unnecessary additions to them. The inclusion of age in their theory is interesting because they don't really explain too much about it. They say that the time that you start offending and stop offending can differ according to who you are, or what your situation is, or random chance. And if you don't really have any predictive power at all in your theory, then it's really more descriptive, and there are already better theories out there that describe these phenomenon better. So that's chapter 39. That's the theory of persistent offending and desistance from crime by Laub and Sampson. On the whole, I'd probably give the theory D minus. That's being pretty generous. I would give this presentation an A plus though.